Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Being an Engineer podcast. Today our guest is Brogan Miller, PE, founder of Doula Studios, where he helps early-stage hardware startups bring their ideas to life. Brogan has shipped breakthrough products ranging from handheld medical devices to massive electromechanical cooking appliances. Today he's here to share lessons from a career spent getting things done in the fast world of hardware startups. Brogan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. Very excited.
All right. So I have like the same question I always ask first, but I have to put that one on pause and ask another one I've been curious about. So this 100 kilogram electromechanical cooking appliance you worked on. I have to know more about this. Please tell us.
And it's pretty cool, man. So it was an electromechanical charcoal barbecue. So it was like a reverse Santa Maria, so a two-stage serving system. You had a charcoal tray that would move up and down relative to the grill, and that controlled the macro shifts in temperature. And then you had an air curtain right underneath the grill that would control more of a micro range. And at a set point of 250 F for 8 hours, we held plus or minus 2 F.
Wow.
Yeah, an uncontrolled fuel source, right? Compared to like resistive heating, which is very easy to control. This is an exciting project.
Was this for like smoking or just your run-of-the-mill grilling?
It could be both.
Okay.
Yeah, because have you smoked before? Not this one.
Yeah,
but
right. I've smoked meats before, a little bit.
Okay, because it can get really hardcore, right? Like waking up in the middle of the night, rehydrating it, tending it. And so, yeah, this one could regulate it. We did do long-term smoke tests, obviously the 8-hour one. So
yeah, very cool. All right, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so back to the normal first question. What made you decide to become an engineer?
It was a spear, and then it was a skirt. I grew up in near the Sierra Nevadas in California, so we go camping all the time. And I remember using my dad's buck knife to carve things. And of course I made lots of implements of war, as a lot of little boys do.
Yes, as young boys do.
And I still have that spear, actually. And then I learned how to sew, and I made my little sister a skirt. Yeah.
That is an answer I've not heard before when I ask people what made them decide to become an engineer. Tell me more about this sewing project. Was that just something that you were interested in for a long time? Did you continue down the sewing path and develop those skills, or was it like a one-time thing?
This idea that there's something that can only be in your brain, and then when you make it a reality and other people can interact with it, it kind of shows you, and it showed some of my students I've worked with, that you can be an active agent of change within your own world, right? The world's not the static entity. You can mold it and change things in your life. And I made pillows, I saw my grandpa use them when he was sick. My sister tried to fit in the skirt, but I made it way too small for her. I was making things that changed my world around me. And go ahead.
I was just thinking of a buddy of mine, Jake Kennington. He's an engineering/life coach, and he gave a talk recently at our PDX event a couple weeks ago. And one of the things he talked about was helping other people, and the definition he gave for helping other people was really interesting. It was one I hadn't heard before. He said, to help other people, all you have to do is create something and then share it. And it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing.
Yeah, I think at that age, what was driving it, and what's driven my career, for better or for worse, is just insatiable curiosity. I wanted to see, for example, one day my dad brought home a bunch of surplus pewter Michael Jordan necklaces. He worked at a local JC. And I put those in an Altoid can, and I melted them with a propane torch, right? And then I just started, I dremeled out molds and wood, poured in there. And one day I was like, what happens when I just fill up this entire Altoids can with this molten pewter and just drop it on the concrete floor? And it made this beautiful puddle. And I don't know how many lives that changed, but it changed my life.
Hey, it changed yours, and you've gone on to change others, I'm sure. How old were you when this happened?
The spear and the
The
spear I
the
was,
molten pewter.
I think I was 12.
Wow. At 12
Yeah.
years old, I was not making molds out of wood and melting down, performing metallurgy. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, insatiable curiosity. How has the insatiable curiosity fueled your drive as an engineer, or how has it impacted your career as an engineer?
It's what set the strategy for my career, even if I didn't have the wherewithal at the time to understand that it was doing that. I've never chosen a job for money. Uh, I've always chosen jobs for what can I learn. I've taken big pay cuts because I wanted to learn, in this case, like electromechanical stuff, how to do that, because I didn't know how to do any electrical stuff. Um, I switched jobs because they get boring, right? And what that means is that there's some downfalls to that, of course. Um, but I will confidently claim that I have lived a very fulfilled life by doing so many different things and a variety of things with so many different hats. And I'm in this space now where I think everything aggregated, and I'm achieving actualization of myself right now with Doula Studios.
Oh man, I've got so many questions that are none of which I sent you beforehand. Were part of the pre-interview process. Let's keep going with curiosity here. To what extent do you think curiosity, you're either born with it or you're not, or it's something that can be intentionally developed?
Well, I mean, it's a core part of our species, right? Like,
Well, to different degrees, though. Like, you have insatiable curiosity. I know people who aren't very curious. Sure, sometimes there's a little spark of curiosity, but that's not their, like, default nature.
I think that, and I don't have any data to support this, it's just my experience teaching kids and stuff like that. Um, it's how well you're exposed to curiosity and how much your curiosity is tampered down by adults around you as a child. Um, I do firmly believe that we are born innately curious. Like I said, it's a core part of the reason our species is successful. But when you're brought into a world, and again, going back to this, your parents or whoever it is in your life are telling you that the world is static, what's the need to investigate it, right? What's the need to prod and probe it? And as you start to develop your skill set, right? Like for us, it's making things, right? For other people, it's writing things. If you aren't given an opportunity to express that and to explore that, you don't have the tool that's necessary to probe curiously into the world.
Has curiosity, this insatiable curiosity, has it ever hindered your career?
Oh yeah, bro. I mean, like if I had if I worked at a big company, a lot of my mentors wanted me to work at a big company and stayed there for a decade. I'd have a lot more money than I do now, right? Not to say I'm very blessed, of course, and the external recognition too, like the stamp of approval. I've never worked at a big company, so I've never had that stamp of approval. But I think as I've gotten older, instead of being insecure about that, I've accepted that this is just who I am, and my strategy was established before I had the wherewithal to realize what it was.
I don't know you very well. We've spoken once before and maybe a couple of online messages, but you seem to me to be a person who is very comfortable in your own skin. Has that always been the case?
That's a wonderful compliment you just gave me, by the way, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I think, yeah, okay, so it's a kind of multifaceted answer. One, like, I don't think I've been given much of a choice but to be me. My insecurities, even when I've pondered them and tried to implement the learnings from them, I'm just me. And again, as I got older, I started to, as everyone does, or most people do as they get older, is I actually kind of like me, and I'm okay with being me. Everyone who I love and I care about, they like me.
Did you ever watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
No. Oh, wait. Is that the one with the Coke can or the Coke bottle?
I don't remember the Coke bottle. It's John Candy and Steve Martin.
Never mind. Totally not that. And no, I haven't seen it.
Okay. John Candy gives a line that's almost verbatim what you just said. I like me. My wife likes me. My friends, my customers like me. I love that answer.
John Candy's great, by the way.
He is great. I just watched a documentary about him. I didn't realize how lovely of a man he was, but he was just like a big teddy bear. Great guy. I had a question and I lost it.
All good, brother. I'm riffing, you're riffing.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we actually did talk about previous to... Oh, no, I know what it was. Self-actualization. If you're comfortable talking about it, and if you're not, no worries. I know it's a personal thing, but what does that mean to you, and why do you think that you have arrived at a point in life where you can focus on self-actualization?
Definitely a part of it is that loving myself and being cool with who I am. That's a big part of it. But professionally, I've had a challenge of trying to describe what I do to people in the past. Okay, early stage, startup employee number 2591240. You go and you talk to like these big companies and it's like, well, what do you do? I was like, well, I've worn every hat. And a certain amount of insecurity has been bred from that because I can't go to someone and say, I am this guy. But at my last role, a couple things happened and I realized that, I want to choose to work with good people. And what spawned from that was also, I get to choose what I do. And I don't have to wait for anybody to tell me what to do. And it turns out that what I like to do and wear all those hats, I can do with no one giving me permission to do it. And I think you had a similar thing, with your career, and it's a pretty good feeling. And it turns out that I'm doing well. And I'm making great friends, and just everything is going well. And so that means that I feel kind of actualized. Yeah.
You refer to yourself as a doula for startups right now, which I think is such a cool, creative title, right?
Yeah.
First of all, you got the name Brogan, which, like, how many Brogans do you know out there? Now you're Brogan, the doula for startups, and you just blow people's minds with that phrase. But what does that mean? What is a doula for startups, and how did you arrive in this place?
Yeah. Extending off my previous answer, the word doula is a core part of the actualization. Because I finally have a word that describes who I am. And it's a really cool word. So, with startups, forgive me, any mothers out there, but it's similar to like birthing a baby. And, doulas, birth doulas at least, there's different types of doulas. They start prenatal, right? They're checking on the mother, making sure the health is okay, blah, blah, blah. And it's not just the event of birthing the baby, right? Someone's got to clean up the afterbirth. And birthing itself is a very messy activity. And it requires not just in an engineering context technical expertise, it requires people expertise. You have to be able to tend to the founder, to tell them that it's going to be okay, because it's tough, man. It's a very scary thing to do a startup. And because I have the experience of doing NPD, new product development, and NPI, new product introduction, and I like to do that and I want to do that, I can help guide this founder. I'm their trusted advisor for that 2-year program. And some of my clients have said, or my partners rather, you're my one neck to choke. And that's what that's what it is. Like, I'm responsible for making sure that their product comes out.
Now, who are you working with typically? Is it like a CEO who will hire you, or is it a group of investors who hire you to like lead a company?
Yeah, the second one I'm trying to figure out how to do. I think that'd be pretty cool. Like a product or venture studio kind of thing. Right now, it's usually founders who just have an idea, and it's a variety of different people. Young, older, retired, not, awaiting funding, self-funding, has funding. It's all over the kind of place. But this thing they all share is that they're early stage hardware startup founders. Go ahead, man.
So we talked a little bit about being a doula for startups. You shared some information, kind of high level, painted the picture of this great analogy with birth being messy and startups being messy, and there's cleanup and there's prenatal efforts that go on. What do those look like? I mean, practically speaking, what are some of the things that you do to help these startups be successful?
Yeah. So the thing about NPDI is that decisions you make in the first 2 months affect the product at the very last 2 months. Building the right thing, right? Some folks have a general idea of the need they're trying to solve, but sometimes you need to go out and talk to users, do ethnographic interviews. I've done that for one of my clients, right? And help design the actual product itself, not just the need. Then requirements, right? You know this, and everyone knows this, requirements. If we aren't marching to the same drum, then where the hell are we marching to? And then that's where a lot of misalignment occurs. Things like, how expectations of how long it takes to do hardware and how expensive it is. I just started doing this because I finally have a model. I just started doing this a year ago, right? So I'm still wrapping up. But I have a pretty nice resource planning model where I can show to the client or the partner, it's going to take this long. Each stage is going to cost this much. And here's what your landed cost is, or your fully burdened COGS is, your gross COGS is for this product. So that means in order to achieve your desired margin, your desired retail price, we've got to design this product to be here. And if you only have this amount of money, then that means we're going to have to cut XYZ corners, right? So I'm telling the user at the very beginning, during this birthing process, look at the cards you're dealt, and this is how we're going to deal with it.
Yeah. What are some of the most common challenges that you come across with early stage startups?
I'll start with the biggest one, which is there's a positive way to spin this saying, but I always forget how to. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. I get it. It's your baby, and you want to be perfect, and it's your personal brand, and you're going out on a limb, and you want to be perfect, but you just can't, right? One of my partners told me, if you're not embarrassed of V1, then you didn't ship early enough, or something like that. Another one is I've seen some founders think that they're the next Elon Musk, and it's good to have that ambition, of course, but no one's going to be the next Elon Musk. And so let's make sure that we're focusing on what we need to actually achieve, right? And another thing, of course, is structure. You don't need a PLM right away, you know what I mean? But you should have design reviews. You should have exit criteria as you're going from phase to phase. You should have a systematic way of transferring CAD between MEs and EEs. You should have revision control on your software. I think that there's this idea that startups need to just move so fast that they disregard things like PRDs. But, you got to move slow to move fast. Often.
You talked about how perfect is the enemy of good enough, and that resonates with me a lot. We have a mission statement that is, there's a big mural in our warehouse, and it says, we build equipment that manufacturing and R&D teams love to use. And the word love is all capitalized, and it's a different color, and it's bold, right? That's the focus, is that not just that they tolerate using, or they're willing to use, but they really truly love to use. And as much as I love that mission statement, the realization of it has been difficult. And what I've learned over the years, I don't like referring to us as integrators, but certainly some of what we do is in the integration area, right? We're building automated machines. Sometimes they're manual fixtures. But one-off machine building is really hard to be profitable on. And to put like all the time into a one-off, whether it's a machine or a product, and make it so good that the users, it's really a delight to use. That is tough, and to be profitable doing it. Now, if you're making 1,000 of this product or 10 million of this product, I think I've never really been in like a high volume product manufacturing environment. That's just not been my career. But I think that if you're making a lot of something, you probably have more leeway to like really truly dial it in and perfect it so that users love to use it. To what degree would you agree or disagree with that statement in the context of like high volume product manufacturing?
Can you repeat the question succinctly?
Yeah. So is it far easier to put the effort and time into a product to make it something that users truly love to use if you're making a lot of them, right? You're making high quantity of them versus you're building something that's just one off.
Oh, no, I think it's the opposite is true. I think it's more difficult.
Oh, tell me about this.
So when you're making one, you can afford to have a nicely CNC part that has, these press fit steel pins that you have perfect alignment everywhere. You've got all your datums figured out. But the moment that you start introducing part to part variation and tolerances, you can't be perfect anymore. You've got to design this thing to be sloppy enough that, you have 95% yield. Also, you don't have as much control as the cosmetics too. Like there's cosmetic variability. You can set like a delta E spec for your color, but it's a range. And what happens when it just comes to the CM from the factory a different color, and the CM says, "Oh, it looks okay. No need to measure it," and then it gets shipped out and it's not. I disagree.
I see what you're saying, and I agree with that aspect of it. It is easier to build one of something and really dial it in because you don't have to worry about all the manufacturing tolerances, and it's out of your control. It's at some contract manufacturer. I get that. Yeah, I don't think it's worth going further down that hole, but I understand what you're saying there.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your time in Africa. You were working with youth there and teaching them about engineering. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I wasn't in Africa, and I've done a bunch of volunteering work, but I didn't do too much here. But what I did do is I gave a couple talks to the best and brightest kids out of Uganda, and it was what a gift. Right, teaching is the greatest blessing or gift that you could ever receive, in my opinion. The opportunity to teach. And what I discovered with these kids is they're super curious, man. When I was walking them through all the manufacturing processes I've done and all the photos, and they were just enraptured by it. They didn't like it so much when I started talking about engineering process. They got kind of bored.
So hold on, this was not in Africa. It was
No.
Ugandan youth that were in the U.S.?
I met this gentleman named Willie Wynn in an airport in Greece. He's from Texas. We vibed, and then he said, "Hey, why don't you give a talk to this organization I run?" But to answer your question directly, I think this is something we don't think about. These kids, they really liked all the engineering stuff. They really dug all this making things, right? But when they tried to look in their local community for an example of an engineer or someone who could mentor them for engineering, there's not as many. They're just not there. And this is straight from the mouth of one of the young girls in this school. You and I, we look around, we're surrounded, right? Even if we're not in an engineering community when we're growing up, we know that there's engineers around. And so how do you foster innovation in youth if you don't have innovation in the older population.
Yeah, it feels like it goes back to that insatiable curiosity. How do you maybe not
Yeah.
build the curiosity? Because I think you're right that we're all born with that innate curiosity, and over the years, as we grow older, it gets stifled and stamped out a little bit. So how do we prevent that from happening?
Yeah.
Let me take a short break here, and I'm not going to read through my whole typical spiel. Just say, if you need custom equipment, manufacturing, fixtures, automation, come talk to us at Pipeline. Teampipeline.us. We'd love to hear from you. We would love to work with you. All right, back to the interview.
Team Pipeline, baby.
Thank you very much. All right. Let's talk about Asia.
Oh, yeah.
You've traveled to Asia. What was the objective of going there, and what are some of the most important things you learned?
Okay. Very broad question, so you have to forgive any rambling here. Cut me off. The purpose, well, you gotta get shit built, man. Right? Like, if you want to go into any meaningful volume, you don't necessarily want to do it, for the stuff I worked on, at least in the U.S. And so I would go there oftentimes by myself and just like solo source, just hot drop into like Dongguan and, go to these terribly unhealthy anesthetization baths, factories, and I needed to find people to make the parts and to assemble the parts together, right?
So is this as part of your doulaship, or was this in previous startups where you were an employee?
Oh, yeah. So, well, both. Most of my time in Asia was when I was employee at one of the 5 startups I was at.
Okay.
Across the 5 startups. But most recently, I went to Vietnam on my own dime. And I can expand on that if you want me to.
I want to come back to that, but previously when you were going to Asia as, part of a startup, you said that you just like drop in and solo source these parts. Tell me more about that. Like, literally, you didn't really know where you were going. You just went to a city where you knew there was lots of manufacturing and started walking around and finding the right shops?
No, not that dirty.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but at the beginning. Well, so you find one supplier, and then that supplier knows some suppliers, and it's like networks here, right? You start to kind of do this. It really started with my compression molder supplier, and wonderful people, and that's how I started to find these other folks. And then I, of course, have my own personal network here in the U.S., and people say, hey, you should check out these people. But that was the minority of the factories I visited.
There was a time when made in Japan was derogatory, right? It was like, oh, it must be a piece of junk, right? And certainly that was true for China as well. I find these days, probably 10 plus years ago, if I would source something in China, it was hit or miss as to the quality that I'd get back. But these days, I feel like, man, they're doing a great job. Like, the parts we get back are every bit as good as parts we'd source locally. They're for sure less expensive, and the turnaround time is like as good or better than local shops that we use. Have you seen kind of the same trend, and what do you think accounts for that?
Well, I think China has been outputting stuff for longer than 10 years ago. iPhones have been made there for a while, right? And iPhones are like a pinnacle of human innovation.
Yeah.
Or cell phones in general, right? It really comes down to who your partner is, who you're building with. Garbage in, garbage out. And I haven't personally experienced that because I've always been getting good stuff out of Asia. But I also spent time there, and I knew these people personally. Like, it's about relationship. A lot of it's relationship. You go out, take them out to dinner, drink beer with them, you try to speak the language. And I think that's what catches a lot of Westerners when they go to Asia. Like, people think when you go to China, you're getting lied to. But you're not. You're getting told the truth in a different way. You just don't speak that cultural language, And if you take the time to embed yourself with your suppliers and to rope them in as a part of your team as opposed to just a vendor that you reach out to, you're going to get good stuff most of the time.
What was it like in Vietnam? I mean, what was the objective going there? Presumably, you already have a pretty good network of vendors in Asia. Why go back on your own dime?
Well, I didn't have any suppliers in Southeast Asia. A glaring hole in my Rolodex, right? And
Why is that? Like, why does it matter that you don't have suppliers in Southeast Asia versus the rest of Asia?
well, everyone's talking about tariffs, right?
Okay.
And everyone's saying Vietnam this, blah blah blah. But I wasn't hearing a lot of firsthand accounts, and I was hearing it all from a very like logistics, quantitative operations perspective. And like I just alluded to, a lot of manufacturing is cultural. And if manufacturing is going to move there, or not move there, disperse among Southeast Asia and part of it will be in Vietnam, then I needed to know the people. I needed to know how to talk to them. And so that was my goal. So I found 10 different factories through 60 different connections.
Wow.
Visited all of them, wrote up a little blurb on what I found, and I shared it with everybody on LinkedIn. So everyone on LinkedIn has access to these suppliers. I'm not a middleman. I'm not taking a cut on it. And it was fun. It was really fun. It was really uncomfortable, but it was very fun.
What are one or two of the experiences you had there that really helped you understand the culture and like how to communicate with them?
Bit of preamble. Everyone thinks that not everyone, sorry, I apologize, but some people think there's going to be an next China. There's not, right? Like, and China's been up in Southeast Asia for forever. Like, China really sees far ahead. So a lot of the factories I visited that could really do good FATP, they were actually Chinese-owned factories. But the Vietnamese and the Chinese do not get along. China actually occupied Vietnam for 1,000 years, like starting around like 0 AD kind of thing. And so if you go to a Chinese SMT factory, you'll see a bunch of Chinese machines, right? Something goes down, the whole line's gone. I got to call my buddy, and he's on a quick flight over the border, and boom, Bob's your uncle, my machine's up. When I visited Vietnamese-owned SMT factories, the machines none of them were Chinese. Most of them were Japanese or German. So all of a sudden, the line goes down. Not only is it a longer flight, it supports a longer flight away, but it's also a disparate culture away. And just more expensive area, right? So that was a key thing, right? China, who's really good at manufacturing. Vietnam, who, they've got the capability to do this, but there's that friction. Chinese-owned factories that hired Vietnamese folks also had problems with retention. The Vietnamese would get trained up and then they'd go work at a Vietnamese-owned factory. But the one Chinese factory that did not have retention issues actively encouraged Vietnamese folks into leadership positions within the factory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how has that, or how will that change the way that you work with Southeast Asian Vietnamese factories, suppliers?
Yeah, I can only say Vietnamese because Malaysia is a different culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Vietnamese folks, in China, you go to China, they treat customers like God. In fact, like I've walked up stairwells and on the front face of the stair it says customer is God. Big signs that say customer is God. Because you're bringing money, right? Money's God. In Vietnam, nobody's God. There's a sense of Vietnamese solidarity. And what that means, it's a little bit harder to break into. It's a little bit harder to become buddy-buddy with them. But in my brief experience, once you're in, you're kind of in. And so move slower with Vietnamese suppliers. I would say give them the space that they need to be able to ascertain whether, that's you're a type of relationship they want to engage in. Be cautious with what their capabilities are. There's, of course, a lot of ambition everywhere in the world, and sometimes folks from any country will say they can do something, but maybe they can't. So kind of trust but verify certain things. In Vietnam, if you want to get just parts made, components, injection molded parts, machine parts, boom. They're going to make great stuff. Assembly, you got to be a little more careful. But it also gave me some insight into how the history of a country affects its ability to manufacture stuff, right? Like Malaysia got a ton of foreign investment, I think I forget, man, I'm gonna say like the 90s or 80s or 70s, something like that. And because of that, there's a whole generation or two of good engineers in Malaysia, right? That you can utilize today. But in Vietnam, they didn't have that. They're making a lot of furniture and some textiles, as I understand it. And so that education infrastructure isn't there, right? The job infrastructure isn't there. So, my long-winded answer.
So you spent this time in Vietnam, your own dime, you learned a ton, and you came back and you wrote up this big article, and you just put it out there for anyone to read and learn and benefit from. What was the motivation to do that? Because you could have been the expert on Vietnamese manufacturing and why it's better than wherever else, right? You could have built probably some kind of value around that, but you didn't. You chose to just kind of give it away and let everyone benefit from it. What was the mindset behind that?
Withholding value isn't the type of business I want to be in. And just to address something you said, I am not an expert on Vietnamese manufacturing. I know more than most people, but I can point you to a bunch of people who are experts, right? Who've been embedded in Asia for 30 years. And I'm not going to claim I'm something that I'm not. But also, it's a different business, man. So if you want to be that dude who connects factories to Asia, that's your job. That's your business. And I'm not that, right? I'm a doula. I use the factories. I work with the factories. I don't necessarily become their salesperson. And honestly, man, it was really good marketing too.
Just getting your name out there, right? Some visibility. Yeah. You seem to be very good at networking. I mean, you've talked about going to Asia and you knew one person and were introduced to 50 other people. I've seen your LinkedIn post also where you go out and get coffee with someone and that someone introduces you to probably a few more people. You go out with them and get coffee and they introduce you to more people. How has networking impacted your career and your life?
I wouldn't have my career without it. Just straight up, dude. Because I was employee single digit, I knew what needed to get done, but I didn't necessarily know how to do it, And so what I did was I leveraged my existing network, specifically the Stanford Design Alumni Network. And I said, hey guys, can someone show me how to do this thing? And so I've created this super large network of mentors, man. I get obnoxious about talking about mentors, and I'll spare everybody here. But folks who taught me how to do what I need to do, who guided me professionally and then eventually guided me personally, I think I had 6, 7 mentors at my wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have the career without networking. And now that I'm running Doula Studios, I had a lot to learn. I've never been a consultant before. So I had to learn how to be a consultant. I had to figure out what type of contracts do I need. I got some free contracts from some really good people. And as I started doing this more and more, I realized it's also the best business development I could ever do. And especially as post on LinkedIn, it creates this image that I'm a connector of people. And it turns out I've become that, but that people value that as well.
I think we all hear about networking, right? It's important to do, you should be doing it, but not a lot of people, practically speaking, know how to go out and network. What are 1 or 2 practical pieces of advice that you could give to listeners who are wondering themselves right now as they consume this episode of the podcast, how can I start?
Dude, great question. Be curious. I think networking has a bad connotation just because people have been doing it wrong. I don't ever go with an agenda. The only agenda I would have is to learn. And sometimes that means learning how to do something technical or learning how to run a business or learning about a person. So just be curious and don't be afraid to reach out to people. Just cold email or always start with a warm intro if you can, of course. But people want to help each other. That's just the thing. I mean, look at our community, Aaron. People there's no competition, man. It's just like, oh, you need something here, Oh, this job's not for me. Let me give it to my buddy. And that's the type of business I want to be in.
Yeah. People do want to help each other. I think that's just an innate part of being a human being. We really do want to help. I love going out to lunch with people as a networking tool, if you can call it that. But it's just like a low pressure way to go out and get to know someone. And then you have a relationship. Or frankly, doing the podcast is a great way to network, right?
Yeah.
I get to have these deep, meaningful, useful, not just to me and the guests, but to everyone who's listening to them, conversations. And that's been a great way to network. But that human connection is so important. And I feel like an old man, right? All these kids these days are just on WhatsApp and Twitter this and X that, and they don't ever get together in person. But there is something magic that happens when you're in person with another human.
Yeah. Social species, man.
Yeah, social species. All right, let's see. We'll wrap this up in just a few minutes here. A couple more questions. What is one thing that you have done to significantly accelerate the speed of engineering?
Besides the obvious answers, like good process, something I've recently done, so I build these teams for folks, and oftentimes they're like, contractors and stuff like that. And when I'm developing the schedule and the budget, I bring in these folks, my mechanical, my electrical, etc., at the very beginning, so that we can set the schedule together. Because that way, when shit hits the fan, which it always hits the fan, they've committed to this time frame. And so it's an intrinsic motivation or motivator that causes them to want to hold that schedule, right? I'm not telling someone to do this. I don't have a W-2 report where I can be a little rougher on it. And so getting buy-in from stakeholders has been very helpful.
Early on in the process.
Yeah.
What's a tool that doesn't exist, but if it did exist, could increase the speed of engineering by, 10x?
I'm still waiting for that model that you can put in a PRD and out pops a full design package. Could you imagine?
Yeah. So someone else said teleportation, and I thought that was a really cool answer. Just, today, now I'm here, and 2 seconds later I'm in Vietnam or wherever. I could see that accelerating the speed of engineering.
Or like a time machine, right?
Or a time machine, yeah.
That's
right.
the ultimate thing. Everything's frozen.
It's already done. Yeah, the project is already done. It was done a month ago. All right, man. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your precious time with me and everyone who is listening to this episode. How can people get in touch with you?
Brogan at doulastudios.com. Or you've probably seen me on LinkedIn blasting up your page. I apologize for that. Anybody reach out, man. I'm always open for any conversation and coffee.
And for those who might be interested in engaging with you professionally, are there guidelines to like, this is a good fit for me, this is not a good fit for me?
Any early stage hardware startup founders.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Brogan, thanks again, man, for being on the show.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much again.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.